Shapes and Sounds acknowledges the traditional owners of the lands on which we're recording and connecting with you from, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and we pay our respects to elders past and present.
Hello, Asami. Hello, Oscar.
Hi, Marcus.
So, Asami, obviously what we do here at Shapes and Sounds is we want to destigmatize mental health for Asian communities. But I often get asked by other people, like, why Shapes and Sounds? Like, where did this name come from?
Great question. I get asked it a lot too, and I forget that we don't give context to this. But when I started Shapes and Sounds way back when, I didn't really know where it was going to go. So I just decided to take the two modalities that I've been trained in and that I used to work in. And that is like shapes is the shapes that you make with your body when you do yoga. So I used to teach yoga for a long time.
Yep.
And then the sounds is about music therapist. I'm something called a registered music therapist.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you make sounds with your body. And so therefore shapes and
sounds.
sounds.
Oh.
That's crazy. I mean, yoga to music therapy is like a big jump. And then you go from that to also shapes and sounds.
Yes. It's been, it's been a long journey and I can tell you more, but it's like, how much time do you have, you know?
Well, we'll get into that for sure.
Welcome to the Asian Mental Health Podcast, brought to you by Shapes and Sounds.
Okay, Asami, I think we're all excited to hear more. I think it's going to be interesting to hear how a leader of a mental health organization actually takes care of their own mental health. You're a registered music therapist. Mm-hmm. What led you to music therapy in the first place? And also, I don't know that much about music therapy. What is it and how does it affect people?
So music therapy, I'll give the textbook definition first so I do it correctly. It's the evidence-based practice of using music in therapeutic interactions. Right?
That made a lot of sense.
Yeah. So it's really what it sounds like. It's therapy with music. What gets interesting is that many people work across the whole lifespan. So you could have music therapists in the children's hospital working with children who are unwell, all the way to aged care and palliative care. And then, there's things like in ABI and acquired brain injury and rehab and things like that. And for me, I decided to work in mental health and youth mental health specifically. In terms of why it happened, why I got here is I've done a lot of music in my life. And I think what's really hard for musicians is the only two options that people give you are do you want to be famous or do you want to be a music teacher? I don't know, and I don't have the personality for either, right? But out of the two, I was like, I think I would prefer to make music, So that's how I met Yo as well. We'll talk about that later. But then in that process of being a performer and making music and meeting other musicians, I then started to hear about people playing music in hospitals. And I was like, but it's not a volunteer thing. This is actually a job and this is a degree. And then I was like, wow, music therapy, this sounds perfect. Mm-hmm. And then I studied my master's and here we are.
Right. So you've always had that passion for mental health, or was it
Yeah. I think so. I think so, honestly. Even with the yoga, it's still it's not it's you're trying to support people to be well at the end of the day. Yeah. And music as well. It's that music helps people in so many different ways.
What was that like working as a music therapist though? What did you actually do?
Yeah. I used to work with a lot of young people and we would write songs. We would listen to music. And maybe a good example of what it looks like is especially for young people who have gone through a lot of traumatic experiences, they'll come in, they don't want to see a psychologist because there's just so much fear around that, right? But they're like, I like music though. I'm happy to spend some time in music. So then they'll come into the session and rather than being like, all right, tell me, Marcus, what's been going on with you? Instead, you're like, oh, what have you been listening to recently? And then often people would be like, you know, I can't explain what I've been going through, but listen to this song. This song describes exactly what I'm feeling. And you know how you hear these songs and it feels like they were written for you. You're like, this explains my situation completely.
Yeah.
And that helps people so much, especially if you don't have the language and the words to be able to describe the trauma that you've experienced, then the music can help you to carry that message. And then for me as a music therapist, I'd listen. It's like, oh, that's so interesting. Like, how does it feel sharing that song with me? And then that really opens up a conversation about like, oh, this is actually something that I've been experiencing, or like, I'm really glad to tell someone I've been holding this inside for a long time, or things like that. Yeah, sometimes I miss it, sometimes I don't. I feel like I listen to a lot of music and a lot of like young people music.
Young people.
Yeah, the music of the youth.
Did that change your relationship with music though? Because it's like you're listening to music and it's like now, like, oh, when you're listening to this song where it's like you're picking up this theme and it's like relating this back to someone's experience and whatever. So
yeah, totally. Like it's completely not ruined. That's a very strong word, but definitely like there are songs that I just cannot listen to ever, or there are artists that I used to love and it's like, oh, now tied in with work, and it's not a bad thing, but it's like music is so precious to us too, right? Like there's so many associated memories with music, and that's what's so powerful about it. But then when you share that in a really intense work context with someone that's gone through something really intense, then it's like you can't forget that. Like your body remembers that pain. And so then your relationship with a song that you really liked also changes. It gets really complex, and music therapists actually do struggle with like keeping up their own music while they practice being a music therapist.
Right.
Like now I don't really do much music. I listen to a lot of music, and that's it.
How did you end up making Shapes and Sounds?
Okay, like long story or
We'll go long story.
Yeah,
Long story?
tell us everything.
Oh, okay. The story is like I used to work in that acute and crisis mental health service, right? And there, as a music therapist, and there I just got this sense that there were young Asian Australians coming into the service, and there weren't that many to start with. But when they did, like I felt like they kind of slipped through the cracks in our service delivery, or they kind of disengaged quickly, or like, I don't know, like the other people, myself included in that, like we just didn't quite understand their needs. Like, for example, you know, we were working with people at the worst times in their life, right? Like the worst crises possible. And then there was this one young kid, and he was of Chinese ancestry. He was like second-gen Chinese Australian. And he had been kicked out of home and he was homeless. But the reason was that he reported to the intake workers was that he got kicked out of home because he got a low ATAR score.
Oh, wow.
And it was like, but that in itself, like it just sounded so trivial compared to other people who were like fleeing like violence and intimate partner violence and like, but the nature and the outcome were completely the same. And the situation, once we dug into it, there was so much trauma within the family, obviously, that something like that would happen. But in the moment, it felt so trivial that he kind of like slipped through the radar and he wasn't prioritized for services and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, the story is like seeing all of that, I was like, hang on a sec, like something feels off. Like I'm also Asian. Like what happens if I go to a service or someone that I know goes to a service? Like, are they going to miss all these things about my situation and my family and family expectations and all that kind of stuff? And then that combined with some other stuff, I just got really burnt out and really, really down. And so I quit my job and then I started a blog about this, like talking about this, and that was Shapes and Sounds.
Wow.
And then it kind of emerged. And then now here we are making a podcast. It's
That's
a long,
so
it's
interesting.
very long. Yeah.
Well, how did you like build all of that knowledge and then be like, yeah, I've got enough and I want to share it to everyone?
Great question. I don't know. I don't like how did I know is the question, like how did I know when I was ready?
Yeah, because you were saying, I guess when did you know you were ready? And like, because you were saying how like when you were working in that sort of acute situation, like you didn't know, or maybe there wasn't like the framework to support you through that. So then how did you go into creating the blog and then being like, like we'll create this space and like share all this knowledge with all these other people?
Wow. I don't
Sorry,
know. No. Now I'm like so imposter syndrome, like, how did I do it?
No, because I'm not saying like this is bad or anything.
I
Like,
know what you mean. Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? I think there are some things in life that are very organic and you're like, oh, this feels weird. So I'm going to just write like angry things into the internet. Or like, then I would tell my friend, oh, hey, I started this blog and I was talking about Asian mental health. And this friend of mine, she's not Asian, but her partner is Asian. And then over dinner, she just started crying. She was like, oh my God. And I was like, what the hell? What's going on? But she was like, I'm just so moved because like I really worry about my partner and I don't know how to help her and like all this kind of stuff.
oh wow.
And then I was like, oh, wow. And then I got goosebumps. And then like all these kinds of things would happen. And like people would give me advice about if you're starting something new, just try and talk to as many people as possible about your project, right? And so then I'd be like, oh, I'm not quite sure what my next career steps are, but I've been thinking a lot about Asian mental health. And then people would be like, what? Like, what do you mean? And like people were so interested. And essentially everyone that I spoke to was like, oh, I feel like there's so much stigma, like. And then the next part of that was like, once that blog kind of emerged, people would ask like, oh, do you know an Asian therapist? And that was the only question that they would ask based on Shapes and Sounds and this platform about Asian mental health. So then I just followed that. It was like, oh, okay, this seems to be a barrier, so let's create a database. And then that database has grown, right? Which you manage now, Marcus. So I think it's been very organic and just like following what's happened and then just like trying to, I don't know, like be audacious, like bold and just like keep going, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's like thinking about how Shapes and Sounds is now. It's so interesting that that's the pathway we came down.
I know, right?
And like I can imagine it's been pretty hectic. Like startups are notoriously difficult to manage. And then on top of that, I guess what we don't talk about is like, how do you manage yourself also while managing a company and managing something that's purely coming from you? Like, how do you deal with, I guess, like, you know, the stress of running a company?
Oh, it's been a journey, honestly. I don't know how else to describe it. Like, it's actually so hard. You know, people think it's so common, right, on the internet, like, oh, just start a little side hustle, start a blog, start an Instagram account and make $10,000 a month, you know, but it's so hard and it's just so much emotional labor and so much like time and energy. And the real nitty gritty of it is that we started, 2020? So it's been like 3 years of essentially no income through the business to pay myself. Like, you know, you prioritize paying contractors and everything else first. And then now finally we've gotten to this point this year, right, where it's like, oh, I actually have a salary from Shapes and Sounds. And then it's this point where all the exhaustion of the past 3 years really hits as well. Because it's like, wow, how did I do it? How did we get here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like more specifically though, I think like we want to know like how did you actually manage that? Like the 3 years of having no income, just like not even knowing if this would like last or anything. Like how did you manage that?
Yeah. First thing is I did have a part-time job and I still do have a part-time role, right? Like I still balance this with my other role. So the reality is like there has to be some kind of income stream. Otherwise, like how do you pay rent? You know, how do you survive? And that was a huge stressor. The other one is like really realistically, I had a lot of savings as well. So this is just very boring stuff. But the reality is like if it will take 3 years to generate income, so then there's nothing pretty about it, and there's no way I would gloss over that for anyone listening. But like I actually had like a huge chunk of savings as well, and then like so many support systems around, right? Like if you have supportive people around you that you know that they would catch you if the shit hit the fan, or they would be like, listen, you need to quit this. You need to quit. And then I guess along the way, you're always looking for indicators as well. Like, is this something I should continue pursuing, or is this not? You know, like, is this something real or is this not? Are people actually interested in searching for a therapist who is Asian? And do the practitioners themselves want to be found by Asian clients? And then that's an assumption. And then you have to test it. Like you have to really bring that to life. So we really went hard on the practitioner list last year, as you would know. And then we're like, oh yeah, this is actually something that people want. So then we can continue on with that. And then you have to test those assumptions. And if all of your assumptions are bad, like, no, this isn't working, then you have to somehow let it go. But it's hard because it's like your baby too.
Yeah.
Spent all that energy on that.
Yeah.
That does seem difficult. Like you've created something and you have to be so willing to let it go, the thing that you invested so much time into, especially with what you were saying, like not getting paid. Like in that sense, has money been like a really big stressor for you? And like, how do you, I guess, like how do you deal with that stress as well? Like specifically, like that seems like something that I'd be stressed the hell out of, especially the current times.
It's so stressful, especially like as a millennial, and then like everyone else is like second homes and stuff. Actually, I don't know anyone that has a second home.
I was about to
I'm
say,
just
what?
making that up. But you know what I mean? You always look outwards and you always compare. That's super hard. At the end of last year, I think I was feeling really burnt out. And we obviously didn't know about this grant and all that kind of stuff. And then I had that crazy dream. In my dream, I was in my living room and I was like, well, I guess I'll just stay with my part-time job and quit Shapes and Sounds. And I literally said that. And then I looked out my back window and everything was on fire and the whole back of the house was on fire. And then I was like, quickly, get out of the house. And then my dog and like everyone in my house and my family, I got them out of the house, out the front of the house. And then I can't remember if the house burnt down or not. But
That's an
at that
intense
moment,
dream.
when I woke up, I was like, maybe this is a sign. Maybe I should quit. Or maybe this is the end, right?
Oh, wow.
But then weirdly, after that, we got our lifeline,
Yeah.
you know? And then the three of us now can be on part-time salaries. This year, now I've gone back to therapy, right? Probably I needed to go back in those 3 years that were really hard, but I knew that I could not spend that money. Like spending the cash would have been more stressful than just like pushing on and then not spending the money.
It's a bit of a catch-22.
Right?
Yeah.
So it was like, how do you actually do it to
Yeah.
take care of yourself? And there is a lot of that self-management, like, you know, you're journaling, you're reflecting, you're
Like catching on early.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yep. Well, we'll pose this question to you now because we've been sort of asking that for everyone. It would be good to contextualize sort of where you're sitting on the mental health continuum right now. Like how well do you think you're doing? So like 1 being the worst, 10 being really, really good.
Okay.
Where do you think you're sitting at the moment?
Today, I think 6.
That's pretty good.
That's pretty good, right?
That's pretty good.
I had actually prepared 5, but then I don't know. I feel like I don't want to like worry people. I don't want to be like a bad representative, but 6. So not
6 is-
bad, not great,
That's solid.
but not bad.
That's
yeah.
very solid. And just before we dive into the conversation further, like just to contextualize what you'll say a bit more, who do you think what you say will sort of speak to? Like,
Okay.
who's your sort of target audience?
Your new favorite word, dinkwads.
Okay.
Dinkwads
Yep.
meaning double income, no kids, with a dog.
That's so specific.
Yeah.
It's very
It sounds offensive. Like I wouldn't really want to
I
be calling
know,
someone a
it's-
dinkwad, to be
a
honest.
dinkwad. I feel like I'm more like a I don't know what the acronym is, but double income with a kid that is a dog.
Do you
know what I mean?
Can someone do the the
No,
linguistics
It's
on that?
like
I can't
a
think of it right now.
duet.
With the
Tad.
kid that has a dog.
No, that is a dog.
No,
Yes.
I can't even know.
That's
I can't
hurting
even.
my
That's too
brain.
many letters.
But on reflection, I don't know if it's actually that relevant. Like that's very, I don't know. Like I think maybe my conversation around mental health is more specific towards people who run their own organizations, like or small business owners, or like you're trying to do something like in the impact space. So you're balancing like survival and impact, which, you know, they're not on two binaries. Or people who are interested in starting their own business as well at some point, or like people who are interested in like creating something. I think like my conversation probably speaks to those people because a lot of the things I do for my mental health are very much specific to that, to make sure that I can keep the machine alive.
And actually, I have a question about that. Like, you're a trained therapist. Do like therapists therapize themselves?
Do I therapize myself?
Yes.
Oh, I wish, hey?
How does that work? Like,
This is a serious question?
yeah.
No, like I actually go to therapy as well. Like even if you know therapy, like you're trained as a therapist, you still need another person on the other side to engage in a therapeutic relationship with. So you actually still need that other party, right?
Yeah.
But I will definitely say that I think like once you're trained in therapy, and Marcus, you would be training in therapy, so you know too, like you get very discerning about the other person on the other side. And if because you can kind of see like, oh yeah, I know what you're doing there. Like, okay, that's not effective.
So then
like,
it's been hard looking for another therapist then.
yeah. And do you know what makes it harder? Because we have our amazing database plug for the Shapes and Sounds mental health practitioner list. Like I meet so many wonderful practitioners, right, for that list. But then they're kind of like our work clients, like clients of Shapes and Sounds, right? So then you can't have a dual relationship. So then I can't go to them.
Yeah.
So then the search continues.
The search
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, for me, I talked about baths, something related to my culture that helps me with my mental health. For you, what parts of Japanese culture or your culture helps you?
Wow, great question. The baths is definitely something I resonate
Okay, it's not just
with.
me, guys.
not
Not
just
weird.
No, like to the extent that I bought a portable bath and it's like a fold-out bath.
This is like
so
sits in your
weird.
backyard or
That's
something.
intense.
No, luckily if it's in the shower
Oh,
bit.
okay.
But imagine like a baby's bath.
So you kind of have to like.
No, an adult's bath.
I don't know how to describe-
When you say baby bath, I'm just thinking about tiny bath.
But that kind of like it's like a silicone pop-out bath.
Cool.
But you can like extend, like sit down.
No,
and extend
it's like the Japanese bath. You sit in it like a deep bath.
It's like a deep groove.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Is there anything
so
else?
The
like,
bath?
Yeah, the bath. There's the bath.
Oh,
Here, let me
it's
broaden the
Japanese.
scope a bit of this
Yeah,
question.
yeah.
And like, what about if we included like habits, we included ideologies even, or like ways of life, like thinkings, thinkings, nice. Like famous sayings and things like that. Is there any sort of like, I guess just ethos that you brought from Japan?
Yeah. In a healthy way, gaman. Gaman is perseverance without complaint. So not recently, like 2 years maybe now, it's a year and a half, I've been training a lot like endurance running. And I do think there's something very Japanese about that marathon training and like long distance training. There's something about grit and perseverance and just consistency, and it's not glamorous, but it's about yourself, and it's not about winning a race, but it's about learning about yourself in that journey of training and of putting your body under a gentle amount of stress for a very extended period of time. Would you say that's kind of like a Japanese philosophy?
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, some cases in Japan, I would say it's like a long time of stress with a very high peak of stress. But yeah, I think the
Forever.
idea, forever. But Yeah, I think I definitely understand that idea of gaman. But do you also find that either gaman or some of the other parts that you take from Japanese culture also hinder your like progress with your mental health or your self-care?
Yeah. I think the same thing that's good is the same thing that's really hard. Like the gaman, grit is so important, right? But then, like, I reckon the last 3 years I gritted through a lot, maybe unnecessarily as well, or like being in work situations where probably just quitting and finding another job is probably much healthier for you and a much more realistic response. But because you're like, oh, you must gaman through everything, I'm just going to stay here. And there's like a saying, 3 years on a rock. Have you ever heard of this?
No. Wait, maybe when you say the whole thing, I might remember. But
I don't know what it is. But it's essentially like you must sit on a rock for 3 years, right?
Right. Okay.
What does that mean though? Like,
and it's like this idea that whatever you do
Yeah.
it for 3 years.
okay.
So it's like if you have a job and you hate it, stay there for 3 years and then see, because a lot changes within 3 years. But I think that's not, I don't know. I think like that, maybe that works in Japan. I don't know. But I don't know if it really works in the modern day world when we have access to a lot of different things as well, and there's a lot of different options and you could move and you don't have to stay in toxic workplaces and things like that.
yeah,
You
definitely.
don't have to meditate on a rock for 3 years.
Yeah.
And 3 years is such a long time as well. Like, I don't think I could do something I hated for 3 years.
Yeah.
So
That's
It's long, right?
it's so
Yeah.
long. So you touched on like persevering through your goals and everything and like 3 years on a rock and whatever that means. But I guess my question is like, obviously there's a limit to how much you can persevere and like there's definitely like an unhealthy amount of perseverance, I guess. So then how did you know your limit, or like how would you know your limit?
Yeah, this is such a good question. I've literally been, I think I've changed my understanding of personal limits recently, again with the endurance running as well. So back in my yoga days, and I taught yoga for like 10 years. It's a very long time to teach yoga. But I think like it got very twisted in the modern day world yoga of what we know about yoga, and like, how there's very common narrative around listen to your body and rest. And I think they're very, very important messages, but I think that they can get really twisted. And for me, I would say it got twisted in the way that it's like, I would be like, I listen to my body. I feel really tired, so I'm not going to go to work today, and I'm honoring my body and I'm respecting myself. But actually, I don't know, maybe like I was just a bit lazy. Or like, I think looking back, maybe I was like really socially anxious and I didn't want to do some things. I didn't want to go places. So then I'd be like, all right, when I check in with my body, I feel like I don't want to go. And I'm going to respect myself. But really, I think I was clouding myself, and maybe a lot of people who kind of are cognitive over processors, like your brain just kind of makes things up for you or decides things for you, then interprets whatever you're feeling in your body in a certain way. Like, how anxiety and excitedness, they're actually like a similar physiological response.
It's like an arousal thing.
Yeah. And it's just your brain that puts meaning to it. So it's like, I think I was like that. But now what's so interesting about things like endurance running, it's very different, the approach to life. So it's like now the philosophy kind of is about, even if you feel tired and you feel terrible, just do 10 minutes of your run. And if you can't do it, just turn around and go home. But you're still doing that part about getting out of the house and just doing it, right? So like I rolled my ankle earlier in the year and there was a quiet part of me that was like, yes, I don't have to run. And then I was like, oh no, to my physio, I think I rolled my ankle. I probably need like 4 weeks off. And then he was like, no, you can just go out and just run. If you want to run.
You're like, oh no.
So then it really changes your relationship with limits, because then you're like, oh, maybe I don't know what my limits are, what I'm capable of. And if I just try a little bit, take the 10 minutes out and then see without doing any damage to my body or if I'm sick or anything. And if it's really bad, I can go home and rest. And that, I would say, has translated into my daily life of like, I'll just give it a go. And if it doesn't feel right, then I can stop. But always like try first. I think humans are very interesting. Like we can often create our own limits as well. But sometimes we can also override our limits. But yeah, I know.
How did you like go from like, say like you were tired and be like, yeah, I won't go, I'm just lazy. And then to being able to like push yourself and be like, yeah, I'm going to do it. Like, cause that's like,
that's
such
so big, right?
That's such a jump. So
I reckon there's been a gap of about 6 years
of like trying to get to the other point.
Between that, you know, it's like, it seems like I just stopped the yoga and just changed, but there's been a long process, and a part of that has been running Shapes and Sounds too, and then just really having to, if I'm the founder, then I'm driving it. I have to be that energy pushing forward. So there's been a lot of small steps in between.
Mentally, how was that for you though? Because it's like, how would you, I don't know, I just can't do that. Like even like, say like coming out of the summer and then having to start like wake up at 7 to go to uni. It's like, that is so tough for me. So it's like, was there any point where you're like, oh, I'll just go back to like being lazy or whatever?
Actually, I do know what happened.
Okay.
So we had our COVID lockdowns, right? And we had 2 years, and I did nothing. You know, just like obviously
like everyone
I was
else
doing Shapes and Sounds, but physically, I just walked my dog around the block. That was it. And then it's like, wow, well done to me for doing some exercise. And then I physically got COVID in 2021, like in that wave, that second wave where everyone got sick. And I got really, really sick. And then I was like, oh, I don't like this. Like, I don't feel great in my body. I think like people like Yo and I, like we entered into lockdowns before like early 30s and emerged like mid 30s / late 30s. It's like, oh, I don't, like my body feels terrible. And so then I was like, I thought, oh, let's go for walks every day. And then, but walking is so boring. Like walking is nice, but I felt like, oh, I don't know if this is worth it. And then it kind of slowly transitioned into running. So I think the answer to your question is there has to be some kind of a motivator and a compelling like reason. Otherwise, why would you make any changes, right?
And in the process of doing the running, it's like you have to persevere. Otherwise it just wouldn't work.
And running is really about consistency. It's like not intensity, but consistency. So even if you do your 3 runs a week, but they're like whatever kind of runs, but you were consistent and then you just build up that consistency and then it's like really good for your running. So then it teaches you, I think that's kind of like a bit Japanese-ish, like that doryoku, like every day kind of like consistent towards an aim that maybe you can't see the end of. Working for a higher purpose, that kind of thing. Well, maybe it's just a marathon thing. I don't know. Everyone, I have not made the marathon yet. No way
I'm sure you'll get there.
What is your overarching view or philosophy towards your mental health, just in general?
Yeah. I think it's take a very pragmatic approach now. Back in the day, I would definitely overcomplicate things and be very, very rigid as well. Like I have to do everything perfectly. Like the yoga mat has to be like here. It has to be like 7 a.m. Like, you know, it can't be 7:05. Like everything has to be perfect. But now I see the whole picture much more pragmatically being like step 1, take care of like safety, security, paying rent. Step 1, basic, right? And that has to happen to feel a level of okayness. And then next is like that physical health, because I would say physical and mental, it's so connected, but it's like if you're sick, then it doesn't matter how well you are, you're distracted by your sickness. So then I really prioritize physical health and sleeping well and eating and exercise and all that kind of stuff. And then like the therapy, like going to therapy, like not the cherry on the top, but I kind of see it like building blocks. You really need the things, because I would be the type that would just jump straight to like trauma processing, EMDR, which is like the eye processing therapy,
Yep.
but without having all of that base underneath. And then, I don't think that works. Like,
Right. So it's like building the foundations and then progressively working up. I feel like that's
Exactly.
similar to like what you were saying about consistency though. I feel like it's like a process. You can't just jump like the gates kind of thing. You have to do the groundwork to build on top. I think that's it.
Totally,
I feel like
hey?
it's very consistent through what you've been saying so far. That makes sense.
Okay. Good.
Following on from that, we got to ask, what do you actually do on a daily, weekly, monthly basis?
Yep.
Break it down for us.
Okay. So the phone thing that I want to tell you all about.
Oh, yes, the phone thing.
So a while ago, I decided to not actively engage with my phone anymore. So that means on a daily basis, I think my screen time is now limited to under 30 minutes.
Really?
That's so
This week has
impressive.
been a lot more because like we're doing this and stuff.
Yeah.
Right? So then that's like taking out the scrolling. And before this, I think my screen time was like 2, 3, 4 hours.
That's
depending
still
on
pretty
the,
low. Is
that low?
Yeah,
I think
that's,
so.
that's relatively low.
But imagine like I have like 4 hours back,
That's
right?
true.
It doesn't feel like that, but I definitely, so there's more time. So that's like a daily thing. There's more time and space. And when I'm not scrolling, then I really try to not do anything, like actually not do anything.
Just like,
I just sit there.
you just sit,
Yeah.
And
like looking at a
sit
blank
and-
wall or...
Sometimes, yeah.
Really?
That's intense.
The weirdest thing is, you know, when you like, just say you order a coffee or you go to a cafe or something,
Mm-hmm.
and then if you're by yourself, it's so natural to be like, okay, order, and then you get out your phone and then you just scroll your phone until your order comes. Then now I don't do that. I just stand there.
Yeah.
I feel like that's okay, I think. But like,
Is it?
say
Yeah.
okay, say you get home after work and then have dinner, blah, 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 whatever you do,
Yeah.
and then maybe you would have had like a phone time before you went to bed. But then what do you do now? Like just
Yeah.
sit in bed.
I did pick up reading.
Okay.
I've read
okay.
a lot. I've read
Yep.
a lot of books. And then also, I think, again, it kind of ties back to the running. Like if you have to wake up very early, then you sleep early. So then it's like bam, 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 rush, sleep.
Okay.
But I do read more.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you're like missing out on news or anything though?
Sometimes. Like, but I think it's a bit scary. And what I mean by that is, remember when the whole ray gun thing happened?
Oh my gosh.
Right?
Yes.
So I still need to ask you about it because it's like you read a bit in the news and then I could feel myself being like, I want to check what everyone else is saying.
Yep.
So I know that what I'm thinking is the right thing to
Yeah,
me. I was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
because I actually don't have any opinions on that. I was like, I don't know what to think about this, but I'm sure if on the socials there's some real clarity around like what it is.
I think it's a general clarity.
Yeah.
General.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing that I miss. Like I would say there's a lot of bad things about social media, but the good thing is it platforms a lot of people who aren't in the mainstream narrative, you know, as in like people of color, like, and people who don't get a voice in the mainstream, whatever the mainstream is, then social media is such a good platform. So then I feel like I miss out on things like that too. But apart from like in terms of like the funny, I also miss the funny things.
Yeah.
I
like the
do.
reals and everything.
Yeah. I just have to live through both of you.
Vicariously through our feeds. What about a weekly basis? I mean, is that
Oh yeah.
daily you've done the running, you've
Yep,
done
and the
less social media.
Yep.
Anything
And-
else?
Yeah, like general more quietness, you know, like more space. I think that really helps, and not listening to podcasts and music all the time as well. So just more space. I think weekly is like the training that I really do every single week. So I wake up at 5.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So intense.
It's early, right?
So early.
I
You
don't
only
remember
do
the last
this
time I woke up at
in your
5.
30s, you know, like you shouldn't do this when you're young. Like that's so boring. You know, you have to when you're older, and like your body is decaying faster than it is regenerating. So I wake up early. The bath That's
bath,
part of
yes.
a weekly routine. What else? Maybe like if I go monthly, then monthly is when I would see the therapist, or not the therapist, my therapist. And I go for a psychology session once a month, and I've made it a commitment to book in. So I book it in early and ahead of time.
Yep.
Because I don't think it's fun. I don't think it's enjoyable in any way. Like I don't
Going to
look
therapy.
forward to it. You know, it's like going to the doctors. It really, there's nothing like beautiful about it. It's like hard work.
Yeah, it is.
You know? Yeah.
How do you know that music or running or baths, all of these things, what's your indicator for you that is working to benefit your mental health, or if it isn't benefiting your mental health?
Even though I created this question, it's a hard question to answer. Okay, I think training is like you feel physically strong, right? Like training is in like the running and the strength training. You feel physically strong, and then I think that physical strength, it translates to like that mental strength, and like you wake up and you're not like, oh, like sometimes when you run your own business, you feel like the world is attacking you and everyone is like, they hate you. And, you know, like we get some funny emails and stuff.
Yep.
You can get so down on yourself. But then when I feel physically strong, I'm like, I can handle anything. And I feel like it doesn't affect me as much, right? So then that's an indicator. I feel strong physically, metaphorically. The social media stuff, that clarity that I have, it's like I don't feel like, just say all the things that we get in the business and stuff, like nothing bad, but just lots of different requests and people want things and people ask a lot of you. I have a lot of clarity and I know how to answer, and I know how to be like, yes, no, I can do that. No, I can't do that. The answer is very clear. I don't have to fumble around. It's like, when do you need it by? Yes or no. So then I know I'm doing well. Like I have the space to make really good decisions, but very quickly as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think
That's interesting. That's very tangible sort of things. Like I don't know.
So, hey?
Yeah.
I feel strong and I can make decisions.
Yeah. I mean, that definitely helps.
That
if
helps,
you're running
hey?
a business.
Yeah.
I guess to just like wrap everything up then, like I think to summarize your philosophy or ethos, you talked a lot about how running has developed some sort of a rhythm in your life. And similarly, you have a sort of a hierarchy of needs that you work on to make yourself feel healthy. So that hierarchy is really where your main go-to for figuring out what should I be doing for my mental health at any given moment. And then, you know, tell me if anything's wrong here. But from that,
that's good. Yeah.
You also talked on the benefits of getting off of social media and how that's changed your life a bit recently. Yeah.
Feeling physically strong.
Physically strong. Yeah.
Although I did get sick twice, so I don't know. But you got sick 3 times.
Yeah, I've gotten sick 3 times, guys. Not to toot my own horn, but I'm the
Marcus
sickest.
got sick 0 times.
0 times. So hopefully it stays
You
that
are the
way.
strongest.
That being said, as a reminder for everyone, what works for Asami might not necessarily work for you. That being said, I hope that this podcast has offered some different perspectives on how you can approach self-care and how to get mentally healthy, I guess. Also, I'd like to highlight the fact that, Asami did mention before, we do have the practitioner list. So if you feel like you are ready to reach out to a therapist or something like that, please refer to that list, because Asami has put her blood, sweat and tears into making it, as we have heard today. On top of that, I guess, do we have a reflective question for everyone to answer?
Wait, we did come up with something, didn't we?
Did we have oh my God, I forgot.
What was it? All right, everyone, we've got the question. So we want to ask you, would you ever try a social media detox or just get off your phone? for, I don't know, a day, a month, however long you want to do it. But
Such a jump, a day to a month.
A few days in between.
if you want, you can just try it. So if you ever do try that detox, make sure to let us know and find us on our Instagram, just Shapes and Sounds.
I was just gonna say, it's so ironic. Like when you do your social media
Yeah,
detox,
go
tell
on
us.
Instagram.
That's so true.
No, but it's funny. Yeah.
Write us a letter or something.
Right. That's a letter.
And yeah, please like and follow and download this episode and all the other episodes on your favorite streaming platform, and join us in destigmatizing and opening up mental health conversations within the community just by sharing this episode with like your friends and peers and family. So yeah, thank you, Asami. Thank you, Oscar. And
Both.
Thank you.
we'll catch you all in the next episode.
See you then.
Bye. This is a production from Shapes and Sounds. It's hosted by Asami Koike, Marcus Lai, and Oscar Abe, and produced by Yo Chung. We're proudly supported by the Victorian Department of Health's Diverse Communities program. All thoughts and ideas you hear are independently ours and our guests.